Okay, seems that we are live this morning. Good morning, everyone that's joining us, 9 o'clock. Welcome back to our next session. I'm very excited to welcome Pierre. He's one of our new speakers, and he's got a really great topic that falls in line with the conference we're having, the new entrepreneur for the new normal. Welcome, Pierre.
Thank you.
Cool. So again, welcome. I'm quickly going to take you through it. If there are any new people that's not part of the conference, this is an online webinar. It's about 30 minutes long. We've got 6 of them lined up for today. On your interface, if you're on a PC, if you look to your, just need to get my directions straight. If you look to your right, you will see there's a chat app. We really encourage chats, so if you guys can just give us a thumbs up that you're all receiving this and hearing this. I will see if it comes through. There we go. I see the chats are currently public, but we'll make them private now. And then also we're running a couple of polls during the session. So if you guys see a poll come up, please engage, click on it. How's it, Daria? Welcome back. Daria, you were quite actively involved yesterday. Thanks a lot. Lucky. Welcome. Yes, if you are on a mobile, you guys will see on the mobile, you've got the video and the presentation shared. If you want to chat, just move your finger over your phone. You'll see a little chat button, and please engage with the chat. So I'm going to turn the chats into private. So if you guys chat with us now, it's only myself and Pierre that will see it. I'm going to be your MC again for today on each of the webinars. I'm introducing all the speakers. And I'll be sitting in the back, so you guys are welcome to ask questions. We'll moderate it while Pierre is going. So Pierre, let me not waste more of your precious webinar time. I'm going to hand over to you, and I'm off.
Hi, everyone. It's really fantastic to meet you like this and to be able to chat to you a little bit today about never let a crisis go to waste. So this term, this line actually comes from a quote that I love. Like people tend to attribute it to Winston Churchill and like all these crazy people, but it was most famously said by a guy named Rahm Emanuel, and he was Obama's advisor during his 28th campaign. Rahm Emanuel was also a former mayor of Chicago, and he said specifically, "You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. A crisis provides the opportunity for us to do things that we could not do before." And that's like the thrust of this presentation. It's like this crisis that we're in, I mean, I don't need to explain it to you. We are in this thing because of this little itty bitty virus that's turning everything upside down, inside out. Even oil is down, like so far down that it went into negative. And I was like, well, how does that even work? Do you then go to the petrol station and they give you like some cash? You fill up and you get some cash as well. Like that's how it works. So crazy, crazy world. I was just telling Eugene, I saw yesterday that there was a concert on Fortnite over the weekend and 28 million people watched it. 28 million people. That's like the biggest concert in the history of mankind. So we live in a crazy world and we have all these new opportunities. But at the same time, obviously, this crazy world is really, it's hard and it's difficult to deal with and it's uncomfortable. And for me, what helps and what I want to talk about is how do we deal with this chaotic time? What do we do within it? Because that's like the biggest thing. How do we get some sort of handle on it? And then how do we actually flip those opportunities into something awesome? How do we then get out of this, not just survive it, but like thrive in it? So first, before we do anything else, we have to name our fear. So I love this Yoda quote. It says, if you see on your screen, it says, named your fear must be, before banish it you can. And this idea that you can name something and it gives you some sort of control is an idea that comes from, I don't know, centuries and centuries and millennia that human beings have been naming things. So we name everything. We name our kids, we name the rivers, we name the mountains, we name eras, we name cities, we name everything because language is the way that we actually control our environment, that we make sense out of chaos. We speak a word, and then the word creates the universe, right? So that's like an idea that is not only in psychology, but it's in mythology, spirituality, religion, philosophy, this idea that naming something actually gives it shape. So, so I've been studying these types of spaces, like chaotic spaces, uncertain times, complex times, for about the last 10 to 15 years. And what I've discovered is they all share like very specific character traits, right? So, and it helps to really to name them first. So these times are sort of like these in-between times. It's times where we have left the old, like this guy on the screen now, where we've left the old, but we've not yet arrived at the new, right? So right now, during our lockdown time, all the way up until there's a vaccine or, you know, some major kind of breakthrough, or the virus dies out for some reason, all that time is this in-between time. We've left the old world and we're not going back. Like that's the big thing. Like, we're not going back. Like, it's not going to just be the same after this. And that's also, if you're speaking of being an entrepreneur and the new normal, then the new normal will be the normal. The old normal is gone. But there's a specific word for this type of space, and it's called a liminal space. So the word liminal literally means threshold. It means like a doorway, that you left the one room, but you've not yet arrived at the next. And this idea was made famous or used most by an anthropologist named Victor Turner in the 1960s. He wrote a book called The Ritual Process. And in that book, he talks a lot about initiations, like and initiation in a sort of, for his research was specific in like tribal kind of contexts in Africa. And he said that initiations were creating like these manufactured liminal spaces. So a liminal space is something in your life when some trauma hits, for example, where you just heard that somebody has passed away, right? So at that time, from the time that you hear that news, all the way up until the time that you've arrived at the new way of living, like you've gone back to your home and everything is sort of settled again, all that time is liminal space. And these liminal spaces in our lives happen to us all the time, and they can be quite traumatic, and they contain like a large element of pain. So initiations also have an element of pain. There's always something like circumcision or scarring or walking over hot coals or being immersed in icy water, or an initiation in like a varsity rage. You have to down this like cheap bottle of whiskey and you get a headache and it's really awful, or you get shamed or whatever. So there's elements of pain. But we always experience in any liminal space, like we experience this pain. And the way that we react to it, like here's the big like takeaway. The way that we react to it is what's key. The way that we respond to it, actually there's a difference. We shouldn't be just reacting, we should be responding to it. So the way we usually respond is like one of these three guys on the screen. Like we either fight, or we flee, or we freeze completely. And in the words of like Dr. Phil, how is that working for you? Like, it doesn't work, right? So the way that we react to it is actually very, very extremely important, because these liminal spaces give us like the biggest chance for positive change. In fact, the only chance. So if you look at the polls there, like I'm pretty sure that back in like, if you've experienced a liminal space in your past, like a traumatic time or a crisis in your business or in your personal life, like how did you grow as a result of that? Like, how did your life change? This was actually like Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist that survived the concentration camps in Auschwitz. And so his book, Man's Search for Meaning, is like mandatory reading for anybody anyway. But so he when there was a mental hospital in Vienna, and which had a really high suicide rate. The patients in the hospital were committing suicide, and his advice to the doctors there was, give them this one question to discuss. And this one question was, what good has come from my hardship? So what good has come from my hardship? And I'm pretty sure that in your life, when you look back at it, liminal spaces like chaotic times actually bring out a great deal of good. So there's like three, maybe four things that liminal space does. Like it does something very specific. It creates very specific circumstances. It seems really chaotic and crazy, but there's like at least three very specific things that I want to give you and tell you about that gives you an opportunity to do something that you cannot do before. So on your screen, there's a picture, two pictures actually, of like liminal spaces. So the one on your right is our current liminal space, the COVID-19 crisis, right? So the one on the left is also a classic liminal space, and that was taken, I don't know if you can guess where that was taken, but it was taken on the day of 9/11, when the Twin Towers in New York City was attacked and they fell, right? So I want you to look at these pictures, and I want you to try and tell me, like if you can see, or just tell yourself, tell me who in these pictures are wealthy. Who's really rich, right? Okay, so second question, like who in these pictures are really well educated? It's even difficult to tell race in these pictures. And it's sometimes even difficult, especially in the COVID one, to tell gender, right? So, and that's what a liminal space does. Like it flattens hierarchies. So all of a sudden, we're all in the same boat. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how educated you are. It doesn't matter if you're what race you are. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are or anything. Like it puts us, everybody, in the same boat to a large extent. I mean, obviously there's exceptions and obviously things aren't that simple, but to a large extent, everybody's in the same boat. And this, it flattens the hierarchies, and that like gives you opportunity to move a little bit more. So the second one, like liminal space builds community. It forms bonds. I mean, if you speak to your grandfather or to your father who fought in a war, maybe the Second World War or the war in Namibia or wherever, then they'll tell you that the people that they fought with, that they formed really, really close bonds. And this is also what a liminal space does. It forms community. And this is something that we in our businesses are always trying to build. It's like trying to build a really great culture and a really great collaboration culture, because we know that collaboration is like a breeding ground for innovation, right? But now the space is doing that for you. And what you then do with that community is really important. The third thing is that liminal space reveals the rot. It reveals what is rotten. It's like, for example, if you live in a house, right, and you've got like teenage boys and they're playing on top of the roof, and all of a sudden they break something and the whole ceiling comes falling down, which is like a chaotic space, like a crazy liminal space. And then all of a sudden the ceiling is now broken, but now you can see, but wait a minute, those beams are actually rotten. They need to be replaced. And like a crisis does this, a liminal space does this. It reveals what is rotten in your business, in your life, like what is unnecessary, what is there that actually needs repair, or something that's just been sucking money, but you don't even know it and you haven't even seen it. And now you can actually remove it or repair it properly. So it does that. So these three things: flattens hierarchies, changes the rules, builds community, and it reveals the rot. So I can hear you saying that like this is all well and good, but how do I go about this? How do I deal with this in my personal life as a human being? And how do I deal with this in my business? Like give me a plan, and we definitely need a new plan. I love this quote, this Mike Tyson saying. It says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It's also one that's been thrown around on social media in the last couple of months, but I love it. A friend of mine says, if you say it like Mike Tyson, you have to lisp. So you have to say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. But so here's a plan. Here's something that I can give you that maybe you can do. So it's got four little steps, 4 things that you can do in a liminal space to help you get through it. The first thing, and I think easily the most important, is to stop. Just stop. because you need to get out of that fight or flight or freeze mode. You need to calm down. And I can see when I look around me and speak to businesses still in the last couple of months or so, people are like going into fight or flight mode and then going out and going in and going out. So they keep on retreating into that sort of into that little lizard brain at the back of your head instead of just stopping, calming yourself down, and then moving from that space. Because this is like one of the most amazing things that human beings can do is that we can actually stop. We can stop and watch our own thoughts and actually remove ourselves from the situation just for a second so we can get like a more clear space, a more clear view on it. I love blacksmithing. So I've got a blacksmith for a friend and I've been learning a lot from him. And the biggest rule in blacksmithing, like if you don't know how blacksmithing works, is that you need hot material and cold tools. Right? So that's like the first rule. Your tools need to be cold and your material needs to be hot. Right? Otherwise it doesn't work. The moment your tools get hot, they can't mold the material anymore. And this is like the lesson for liminal space. You need to be cool. The environment around you is hot. Like it's all sorts of crazy, but you need to be cool. So you need to learn how to calm yourself down. So I want to tell you a story. The story is about the Buddha. So the Buddha was sitting one day, as he does, like underneath a tree, and teaching his disciples. And as he was teaching them, this guy walked in. You take a look at your slide there. So this guy walked in, and his name is Mara. So Mara is the demon of death in Buddhism. So he's a pretty freaking scary guy. If you look at some of those pictures, I swear that one in the middle looks like he's got the skulls of dead puppies on top of his head. Like it's really freaking scary. So Mara walks in, and then the disciples run up to the Buddha and they go, Mara is here, Mara is here. They're like freaking out completely. And then the Buddha replies, I see you, Mara. Let's have tea. Now, the lesson in the story is that in a liminal space, in order to stop, we need to actually be facing our pain and our fear and the uncomfortability of the situation, like how terrible this actually is, because we tend to avoid it. And as human beings, we tend to avoid it and rather complain on Facebook or, drink all of our freaking pineapple beer or wine if you've got left and like fall into our addictions rather than just facing the pain and facing the fear. So there's a practice here that's really important, which is I call it let's have tea. So let's have tea is to sit with your emotions and then feel through them, to really experience them, because that pain is necessary in a liminal space, because that pain helps you to actually remember who you are, to remember that you've got the courage and you've got the skills necessary to be going through this. The same as an initiation ceremony. The pain in the initiation ceremony is actually what moves you forward to the next stage. So it's literally sitting with your team if you're an entrepreneur and going, how do you feel today? Yes, this sucks. This is awful. And to allow people, give them space to vent and then to feel that emotion. And then they can remember that they've actually gone through this, that they can do this, right? So the first one, stop. The second one is to observe. So once you've stopped, and this is the same rules as getting lost. I live in Cape Town, so often people get lost in the forest or in the mountains. And the worst thing that you can do is to run faster, right? Like that doesn't help. You need to stop and then observe to see what is actually around you, what's there that you can use, how has the rules changed? So, which is the first one that you're observing. It's like, how did the rules change? There are new rules in a chaotic space. What's different now than it was before? Where is there a rule which I can now, which prevented me from doing something before, but now that rule is gone, so now our business can pivot and do something else because that rule isn't there anymore, right? And then who are the new leaders? Because what's fascinating to me about these liminal spaces is that the leaders change, because like I said earlier, the hierarchy is flattened. So, and all of a sudden these new leaders emerge because they've been the leaders all the time. Because normally the people that are at the top are put there by patriarchy or power or money or all other sorts of nepotism and other crazy ideas. But in a chaotic time, the real leaders emerge. So if you have a business it's very worthwhile to go and look and see who in your team are are busy naturally like taking the lead, who is actually like going for it now, and then to give them more power and more responsibility. And then the third one is to look and observe, and like I said, what is rotten, what can we replace right now, what can we just let go and just let it die anyway, like to observe and see that. Because in a liminal space, we need to be looking around to see what we can use. I love this term in French called bricolier. It's one of my favorite words, right? So a bricolier is somebody that uses stuff that they can find around them, right? So if I can just look around what's on my desk, I've got like scissors and books and Xbox controllers and all sorts of crazy things lying around. And what can I build from that? So to just give you a little bit of a better picture, this guy is probably the most famous bricolier of all time. It will give away your age if you know who he is. So if you want to write in the comments there, in the chat, do you know who this guy is? I wonder if I can see who's first, like who's going to write first in the chat who this guy is, right? It's MacGyver. So if you don't know MacGyver, go and find some of his old episodes on YouTube or wherever. And MacGyver used to be able to make he'll take like a scissor and a pencil and make a satellite dish, right? And that's what we need to be. Human beings are tool makers. That's actually why we're such highly visual creatures, because we keep on looking around us to see what we can do and what we can use. All right, so the third step is to act. Now, action trumps everything, right? You can't stop at observing. You need to stop first, then observe, and then you need to act. You need to choose. Like action trumps every single thing. Like think about it, if Indiana Jones would fall into a big dark hole, like he can do the first two steps, like stop, calm his nerves, start to observe what's around him, but then he needs to act. You're not getting out of the hole if you don't act. Like action trumps every single thing. And action has to do with choice, with this amazing ability that human beings have to be able to make a decision, right? So Viktor Frankl wrote in that same book, Man's Search for Meaning, he said, man does not simply exist, but always decides what his existence will be, what he will become the next moment. By the same token, every human being has the freedom to change at any moment. And this is what we need to do. This is so very, very important in a chaotic time and in a liminal space, to actually make a decision and to start to build something, to make a tool. Like I said earlier, human beings, we are tool makers. This is what we do. And business, tools solve problems. So if you look around you, every single thing that's on your desk, that's in your study, or wherever you're sitting, the phone you're holding in your hand, it's a tool. This is what we do. We make tools, right? And it's so surprising to me how often businesses forget what business is basically about. So tools solve problems, right? And businesses solve problems. That's what a business does. A business doesn't exist to make money. It doesn't exist to make you famous. It doesn't exist for any other reason but to solve a problem. And we have massive amounts of problems right now. So we should be having massive amounts of new businesses to be solving all of these problems, because tools actually communicate value, right? If you look on your screen, you'll see like everything from like the hand axe to the iPhone to the smartphone communicates value. We've been making tools for 2.5 million years. We've only been speaking. Language is only 250,000 years old. And before that, tools communicate value. So if you want to put something out there, make sure that it's useful and it's valuable. Because things that aren't useful and valuable, you know where they go? The trash. So if your business isn't useful or valuable during this time, it's going to go to the trash. So make something valuable, right? So the last one, which is very, very, also very, very important, is to reflect. To actually stop and to look around you and reflect on what happened after you acted, right? Because when you act, you actually start a process of cause and effect. And in a liminal space, in a chaotic time, we are dealing with things with unknown unknowns, right? So it means we don't know what we don't know. And the only way to figure out what we don't know is to poke the box, to act and then see what happens. Because what you're looking for in a chaotic time is the new pattern, right? Because the old patterns have disappeared. So a pattern is like the opposite of chaos. So if you can find the new pattern, then then that will give you the edge, right? So I keep on telling people that whoever finds the pattern first wins. And you can only do by reflecting on your actions. So doing a practice, like one of my favorite practices, when I do this session, I do it for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and I sit with people and we actually go through all of these let's have tea practices and examen practices and these meditative practices. And so the examen practice is one where you reflect on your daily experience, that of yourself and that of your business, to then see, but what worked today? And it works on a very, very deep, sort of intuitive level, because we need to, in a chaotic time, like things like logic and reason don't necessarily work that well. You need to go to an intuitive place with your team to really sit down and go, where did you feel like in your gut something worked today? Where did you feel in this week like that's really cool? Like that's really life-giving. And where did you feel the opposite, where it felt like you were pushing a boulder up a hill, like it just wasn't working and it's not worthwhile spending our energy on anymore? And when you continually sit and do this reflection, so stop, observe, act, reflect, and then keep on doing the action and reflection, that part of the cycle over and over and over, you'll start to figure out a pattern. And the sooner you can figure out the pattern, the sooner you can get out of this. Right? So in closing, I want to leave you just with a couple of thoughts. So my son is a wrestler. You can see him there on the picture on the right-hand side, right? So my son's a wrestler. That's his coach. If you can spot who that coach is, you can write his name in the comments. So there's a saying in wrestling that when you feel really, really stuck, right? You're in a hole. Somebody's got like their arm around your throat, it's awful. You feel stuck, pinned to the floor. Like there's a saying that says you're always only a couple of small moves from being free, right? Just a couple of small moves from being free. And if you watch wrestling on the Olympics, especially Greco-Roman wrestlings, the moves are so small. It's literally like a little twist of the wrist, a finger that moves out, a little bit of a shift in weight. And those small little movements actually set off a chain of movements and reactions that'll shift the balance of power. That'll cause somebody else or the other person to win. So I want to encourage you and say that you're just a couple of small moves away from being free. Just by doing this next thing, reflecting on it, this little next thing, and by following like these 4 little steps: stop, observe, act, and reflect. All right? That's really, really, really important, and that'll help you to actually just like get free. And the most important thing to do these things, when you do these practices, is to do them in your journal. There's a poll that's going right now. Do you use your journal? Do you own a journal? So it's like these things, you can't figure it out in your head. You need to be writing them down and like figuring them out like that. So it's really, really important practice to then use a journal actually and to like figure this stuff out, and encourage your team as well to write stuff out every single day. What worked today? What didn't work today? What actions can we take tomorrow? How do we feel about this? That works really, really well. Right. So, and the last one is to keep on training, because when this crisis hit, when everything was announced and lockdown was announced, or when the first infection was caught in South Africa, the first line that I said to my team and to our community was like, this is what you trained for, right? So I asked earlier in the polls if you're familiar with meditation practices, and I see that a couple of you are, but the massive important thing about training is that training prepares you for liminal spaces. So if you haven't been training before, training in stopping, training in observing, training in reflecting, like using your journal, keep on watching what's moving around you, what's working. If you haven't been doing that before, it's obviously not too late. Because what's fascinating to me is that it's in terms of it's war or the military and spirituality, those two organizations or groups, use training to prepare people for chaotic times. Right? So let that set in for just a moment. Like the military use training to prepare people for complex, volatile, uncertain, and ambiguous scenarios. Right? So training is the key to survive this, to keep on actually practicing and practicing and practicing. There's a famous maxim. So in in the military, it says the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle. Right. So, and that's what I want to encourage you to do, besides just doing these practices, is to keep on doing them to prepare yourself and your team for like the next big crisis, for like the next chaotic time, for the next liminal space. And the very last one, last little line to encourage you, it says, people turn shit into sugar all the time, and you can too. So thank you guys so much for listening and taking part, answering the polls, getting into there. I don't know if we can open up for questions, if we've got time for questions, Eugene, that would be great. If somebody wants to ask something or comment, or just open up on the chat.
Cool.
See a couple of really cool polls.
It seems that you've answered everyone's question.
Yeah, that tends to happen. It's fine.
Cool. Listen, guys, so thanks a lot for your participation. Really appreciate it. The polls and the info from the polls and stuff was really valuable. And Pierre, thank you. Thanks a lot. I absolutely loved it. And there's definitely I love the sayings and stuff that you've got also in the history of how we react in a crisis. And yeah, I mean, that's what this whole, conference and seminars and these workshops are all about. So Pierre, thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for coming to chat to us. Then we've got our next speaker is Donnie Jacobs. Donnie's going to talk about the fourth industrial revolution plus COVID equals total reinvention, which is a really amazing way to think of where we are now. So the next session will go live at 10 o'clock, and I'll see you guys online at 10. Thank you, Pierre. I really appreciate your participation, and all the listeners as well.